Hello, friends. I'm your host, Ethan Cole. Here you'll get only the real facts, no rumors, no misinformation, and every story comes backed with proof. Just an hour and a half away from the deadline, President Trump took to Truth Social with a major announcement. He said that he is talking to Pakistani officials, and based on that conversation, he will agree to suspend bombing Iran for 2 weeks. He also claimed that Iran has agreed to open the Strait of Hormuz during this period.
Just an hour and a half away from that deadline, President Trump seconds ago taking to Truth Social to say that he is talking to Pakistani officials, and based on that conversation, he will agree to stop bombing for 2 weeks. He also says that Iran has agreed.
But the real story begins here. Trump wrote that this will only happen if Iran agrees to fully and safely open the Strait of Hormuz. So the approval from Iran is still pending. Trump says this will be a double-sided ceasefire and claims that the U.S. has already achieved all military objectives and made significant progress toward a long-term peace agreement with Iran.
Open the Strait of Hormuz for that time period. So I'm going to read part of this to you. It says, he says, subject to the Islamic Republic of Iran agreeing to the complete, immediate, and safe opening of the Strait of Hormuz, so they still have to agree. I agree to suspend the bombing and attack of Iran for a period of 2 weeks. This will be.
But wait, the next part is even more shocking. For weeks, the U.S. and Iran have been negotiating back and forth on 10-point and 15-point proposals. Iran rejected some U.S. points as unrealistic and submitted its own plan. Even now, it's unclear exactly what points are included and which ones the U.S. is willing to accept.
You and your co-author, Jonathan Swan, have an excerpt from your new book, Regime Change Inside the Imperial Presidency of Donald Trump, in the New York Times today. It's fascinating. You describe in it a situation room meeting where Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu gave a detailed pitch for going to war with Iran. Do you think the public fully grasps just how influential Netanyahu was in President Trump's decision to attack Iran? What have you learned?
So our reporting, Anderson, for the book, and this is our first excerpt from it.
And here's another big development. Israel is also part of this ceasefire. They have agreed to suspend their bombing campaign while the negotiations continue. This means all three parties, U.S., Iran, and Israel, are involved at least at the start of this ceasefire.
Part of this ceasefire, that they have agreed to suspend its bombing campaign while these negotiations continue. Now, of course, we don't know where that ends. We don't know if that's for 2 weeks. It's not specific, but Israel is part of this starting point, which is this ceasefire. So all three sides are participating. At least that is according to a senior White House official. Now, back to what your point is about the 10-point plan. I mean, we've been hearing about a 10-point plan from Iran for weeks now. The idea was that the United States presented a 15-point plan, that several of the points on that plan, Iranian officials were saying were unrealistic, they were impossible to meet, and they came back with their own plan. We are still at a loss as to what exactly was in that plan. What are the actual points? What exactly is the U.S. now saying that they are willing to work with? President Trump had gone back and forth on the idea of reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Clearly, he has focused on that as a top priority after last week saying he didn't need to reopen the strait as part of a deal to end the war in Iran. So whatever it is, Iran is likely to have said long term the free and fair passage through the Strait of Hormuz, because that is something President Trump just 2 days ago or just yesterday said was a top.
Now, the most critical point, the Strait of Hormuz. Iran's foreign minister said that if attacks against Iran stop, their armed forces will also halt defensive operations. For a period of 2 weeks, safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz will be possible, coordinated with Iran's military.
Priority.
Breaking news, Iran's foreign minister just responding to Trump's ceasefire announcement. I want to read part of it to you. He says, if attacks against Iran are halted, our powerful armed forces will cease their defensive operations. For a period of 2 weeks, safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz will be possible via coordination with Iran's armed forces and with due consideration of technical limitations. Obviously, those words are crucial there. And the Supreme National Security Council of Iran has also issued a statement that I have here, and I'll just share you a couple of the important lines here. One of them is that the regulated passage through the Strait of Hormuz under the coordination of the armed forces of Iran, thereby conferring upon Iran a unique economic and geopolitical standing, which sounds like, in a translation, Iran saying that they see this as acknowledgement that they control the Strait of Hormuz. Let's go to Zachary Cohen, our national security reporter here. Zachary, what are you learning about this? We're just getting these dual statements, one from Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and also from the Supreme National Security Council that I just shared part of. What else stands out to you here?
Yeah, Aaron, the piece of this about the Strait of Hormuz really is the most remarkable thing, I think, that jumps out immediately and says Pakistan has submitted the same to the American side. Said plan emphasizes fundamental matters, inter alia, the regulated passage to the Strait of Hormuz under the coordination of the armed forces of Iran, thereby conferring upon Iran a unique economic and geopolitical standing. So effectively, that's reiterated in the tweet as well, saying that at least for the period of 2 weeks, the Strait of Hormuz will be open effectively, though with coordination via the Iranian military. And it's important for people to remember that the Strait of Hormuz was not controlled in a literal sense by Iran prior to those U.S. Israeli joint military strikes that kicked off this entire conflict several weeks ago. Iran responded to those strikes by closing the Strait of Hormuz, and it appears that this ceasefire is predicated, at least in part, on the legitimization of Iran's control of that key waterway. And that goes with an implication of if the waterway can be opened temporarily, Iran likely could reclose the strait should negotiations not progress in a way that they see fit, effectively. So it also says that talks between the U.S. and Iran should occur as soon as this week. In Islamabad, Pakistan has been acting as the key primary intermediary country between the U.S. and Iranian regimes. A lot to hammer out here, but the Iranian statement does seem to suggest that, in principle at least, the Trump administration has agreed to the broad contours of their 10-point proposal, at least as a starting point for these negotiations. And again, it's hard to overemphasize how important the Iranian control and demand that that control be legitimized of the Strait of Hormuz is as far as a starting point for these talks.
Yes, and that, of course, may be the absolute deal breaker. And I'm just reading the final sentence here of the statement from the Supreme National Security Council in Iran. They say, our hands remain upon the trigger, and should the slightest error be committed by the enemy, it shall be met with full force. They also emphasize that this deal, such that it is, does not signify any termination of the war. Obviously, we're talking about a temporary ceasefire of sorts. Just sharing this information, right? So we've got the response here from Abbas Araghchi, foreign minister, and also from the National Security Council in Iran. But two things really stand out here. One, the safe passage that Trump is saying is going to be provided for 2 weeks as part of this, kind of the central part of it, through Hormuz, they're saying is possible via coordination with Iran's armed forces, which obviously implies that Iran controls the strait. And then from the National Security Council, they say this confers upon Iran a unique economic and geopolitical standing in terms of them regulating passage through the Strait of Hormuz. So what do you hear in all this?
And it doesn't stop there. Iran's Supreme National Security Council stated that this regulated passage gives them a unique economic and geopolitical advantage. This essentially legitimizes Iran's control over the strait, and if negotiations do not go as they see fit, they could close it again.
I mean, listen, who knows what's going on? Donald Trump lies every single day. Clearly, he's not telling the truth. But if you accept even part of the Iranian statement, Donald Trump has agreed to give Iran control of the Strait of Hormuz. That is extraordinary. If you go deeper into the statement from the Iranian National Security Council, they claim that Trump has also agreed to Iran's right to enrichment, to suspend all sanctions against Iran, and to allow Iran to keep their missile program, their drone program, and their nuclear program. Now, who knows if any of that is true, but if at the very least this agreement gives Iran the right to control the strait, that is cataclysmic for the world. And it is just stunning that that's where we have gotten to, that Donald Trump took a military action that has apparently, at least for the time being, given Iran control over a critical waterway that they did not have control over before the war began. So it just doesn't sound like there's actually an agreement, because what Trump is saying is totally different than what the Iranians are saying. But if Iran has the strait permanently now, what an error, what a miscalculation this entire endeavor was.
I mean, the day began, Senator, with a post on Trump's social media website that I don't know what you thought when you saw it. I have said that I did not think it was real, and I had to go check it because it was so stunning. But it began with, right, a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. That is how the day began. Of course, this outcome that is not going to happen tonight is one that everybody would want. And yet the path to get here and where we are right now, how do you see it?
What's even more shocking is the gap between Trump's version and Iran's statements. Iran claims that the U.S. has given them control over the strait, along with the right to continue their missile, drone, and nuclear programs. If true, this is a massive miscalculation for the world.
A cave, a crevice, all of Saturday, and rescued on Sunday. Flown out of Iran as the sun was rising on Easter Sunday. A pilot reborn.
This war is not just political, it also has a religious dimension. Some U.S. officials described the operation almost as a holy war. And combined with Trump's threats, it seems to target a historic Muslim civilization.
Senator, what do you say to that analogy?
Yeah, it's clear that for many in Trump's orbit, this is a holy war. And I think you have to pair what Hegseth said and has said with Trump's threat to end the Iranian civilization, right? This is a historic, proud civilization. The regime is evil. They have perpetrated great harm throughout the world. But the Persian civilization, a Muslim civilization, is a historic, proud civilization. And the reality is that it is probably true that President Trump and others see this through religious terms, see good, see righteousness in eradicating a Muslim civilization from the world. That's disgusting. And the reality of some of the rationale for this entire operation may be coming into focus. It never made sense as a national security matter. Everyone knew that beginning this war would almost certainly end up with Iran controlling the Strait of Hormuz and the American economy being held hostage by Iran. And so maybe we're seeing some of the real rationale, the true objective, a war waged by a majority Christian nation, apparently, against a majority Muslim nation. Again, something that I think most Americans would have thought unthinkable as a premise for war just a handful of months ago.
So, friends, even after this short-term ceasefire, the situation remains extremely complex. Iran now has control over the strait, which creates a major geopolitical challenge for the U.S. and the global economy. This agreement appears temporary, but its impact could be long-lasting.